Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session of Come Cloud with Us. I'm your host, Abdul Kazi, and we're missing Chris Gill. He had to attend some personal stuff, so I'll be your co-host. And with that being said, we have a very special guest. Uh, Ligi Thomas is back again with us. Thanks for being back, Ligi. It's great to have you back again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and since we've chatted, I know you're working you have changed jobs and you're more focused on the AI side of things. So kind of let's talk about what you have been doing lately and any interesting projects that you're working on.
Sure. So I'm currently with H&R Block, working in the Gen AI space, and it's a very exciting space. As we always know, there's a lot happening in the Gen AI space, especially with it's the most happening kid on the block, I guess these days. It's The technology continues to proliferate at a pace that is fairly difficult to keep up with, but that's what makes it more exciting as well. Right now, as we speak, we have the Microsoft Build Conference that is happening. We have the Google I/O Summit that is happening. There's a lot of news and a lot of great releases happening on all sides. So, really, really exciting year yet again for AI and generative AI. It's been 3 years in the running. Let's hope we keep it that way.
Yeah, and AI is such a big field. Like, what is your focus there? Because I know with AI you can do multiple things, right? So
Yeah,
are you focused on any specific
yeah.
you know
So, I'm personally passionate about yes, AI is a huge huge space. I've been in the AI space for several years now. Before Gen AI, it became a thing, but I'm more focused on the generative AI side of the house, with the large language model capabilities to generate text and other forms and other modalities. Especially interested in we started obviously with the RAG side of the house, a retrieval augmented generation. Now agentic AI seems to be the buzzword, and then there's a lot happening in that space. Yeah, so really excited and passionate about everything happening in the generative AI space as it pertains to the industry.
and kind of talk about what are the typical use cases you're seeing there.
So, probably can't talk specifically to talk, but can speak in general about, I feel like in every organization, every department, every team probably has a cause or a reason for AI. And it may be not just a net new AI case, it might also be how do we do things differently. Like, we might already have a use case and we've been doing this a certain way for a certain valid reason for ages or decades together, and come AI, it gives people an opportunity to pause and reflect and ask, might we rethink the way that we work? Is there another way to approach the same problem but in a different lens? So it doesn't necessarily always have to be net new problem statements, so to speak, because the needs and the requirements, that's still the same at the end of the day. But all of a sudden, I feel like people are now going back to their backlog of ideas and those things that they had parked for centuries, and like dusting it up and taking back, like, after all these years, would technology be at a place where we can actually do things? There could be net new things as well, but I kind of challenge ourselves to think about, it's not always a hammer in search of a nail, if I may.
Mm.
It's genuinely people trying to pause and reflect and ask ourselves, might we rethink the way, question the status quo, and think about different ways of solving the same problem for that matter. So, for example, I always say chatbots. Chatbots have been around for as long as I can remember, but come ChatGPT, it turned the tide in a completely different direction. It's not that people have never seen a chatbot before, right? It's a whole new way of chatting, and that conversational AI paradigm itself that enables people to dream and imagine, oh, is this also possible in chat? So that's really exciting in that space to just, now that we have a new technology, a new hammer, and now we got a net new set of problems to solve. It's the same old thing, but just reimagining the way that our world works.
And one question I always think of is, what are the ethical implications, I guess, like, and how are companies dealing with that?
Yeah, absolutely. The first 1 or 2 years, I'd say, was more about this shining new object, and people were just like taken aback and like, is this really a hype, or is this bubble going to burst anytime soon? Is it going to make it past 1 year? But I think now, 2 years down the line, you don't have to sell the technology anymore. I think the promise and the potential of the technology has been sold enough to enterprises and to people. Now it's when the tire hits the road, it actually gets real. And when it starts to get real is when enterprises now sit back, and the organizations are really, really serious about this, now start thinking about safety and security and adoption, honestly, because without any of these guardrails in place, you really cannot expect user to trust and adopt a technology as powerful and impactful as this. So yes, now is I think more so when we will see a lot of interest around, and a lot of innovation around the safety, security, the ethical part of the house, and in that area.
Okay, now that, yeah, that question always comes to my mind because I'm like, the bigger the bigger the company, the bigger the issues they might have from a legal aspect too. Because intellectual property, is somebody going to use this technology in the wrong way, or are bad actors that are going to get the technology or whatnot? And yeah. With
Yeah.
that being said, we'll let you dive into your topic.
Awesome. Thank you. In fact, that's a very good segue into my topic that I wanted to talk about briefly here. Here, let me share my screen real quick and we can get started. All right. So, what I wanted to talk about today was a kind of tool, or a toolkit rather, that you could have in your kitty if you are someone who's been thinking about the ethical side of building AI, and how might we really, sort of go about this entire experience. And this is more so coming from a school of thought that we usually have a lot of talk around ethical AI. There's theoretically a lot of advice that is doing the rounds, but practically, when it comes to dealing with this at a tactical and operational level, there's generally very less tools or techniques or toolkits that are available to practitioners to be able to do something about it. And that's why I'm very excited about the HAX Toolkit, or the Human AI Experience Toolkit, because if you're an engineer, or you're a designer, or you're a product manager, someone who's involved in this space, who's actively building products, this is probably a great toolkit to have on your side, and to do that. So, with that, I will get us going with the session. So, to start with, I have a quote that kind of talks to me on this area. We we judge ourselves by our intentions, and others by their actions, and that's one from Stephen Covey. We say that in responsible AI, or as far as responsible AI is concerned, intent alone will not do. Intent alone is not enough. There is enough reason to take action. So without action, harm can offer. The trust is eroded and the technology risks being misused. Because the same AI, the same technology can be used in different ways, in dangerous ways. For example, if you consider facial recognition, for surveillance, for it can be used for bias in hiring tools, it can be used for deep fakes. The very same technology can have a dual use nature and can be either used for good or for harm. So the how really matters. AI should benefit users and should be designed with people in mind, but the how of AI development matters as much as what we build. Now, how to build AI in a human centered way is what we're going to be talking about this in the rest of the session. So, it comes down to the three tenets, as I call it: tie all technical decisions back to user needs. You prioritize real world impact over just technical capability. You involve diverse perspectives early and throughout. So you avoid biases, you ensure fairness, and reflect varied experiences. And third, we plan for failures. So you design AI systems so users can recover when things go wrong. So, for example, there's clear error handling, there's override mechanisms, things of that sort. So, with that, the introduction to the HAX Toolkit. So the HAX Toolkit was developed by Microsoft. It is a set of tools for creating responsible and human-centered AI experiences. So what that means is it helps AI practitioners, people who actually build AI products, to incorporate ethical considerations into their design early on into the product, not just bolt it on towards the end. So the way it supports, how does it support AI practitioners to build responsibly? It provides frameworks, tools, and guidelines for that. It encourages accountability and transparency in the system, and it promotes awareness of unintended consequences. So, what that means is there are several components of the toolkit, and we will maybe not have the time for all of these, but we will certainly look at least at the first one, which is the guidelines for human AI interaction. So, let me walk you through this perhaps. So, there are four components of the toolkit: the design guidelines, the design library, the workbook, and the playbook. So these are crafted to provide clarity and structure in the design of human AI interactions. The toolkit itself, it synthesizes over 20 years of research. It was first introduced in an award winning research paper. It is grounded in real world insights from practitioners. So it's quite ideal for product designers, AI developers, UX researchers, design strategists, and all. So you'll see in the upcoming slides, this is just double clicking and deep diving on the first slot there, the guidelines for the human AI interaction. We have about 18 guidelines. We will try and go through all of these. So, the 18 evidence based best practices for creating intuitive AI user experiences. Now, as I said, this is synthesizing over 20 years of research. In addition to this, you have what we covered in the previous slide. You have a design library. The design library is a very rich database of design patterns and real world examples on how to implement AI interaction guidelines. There's a workbook which is used to facilitate cross functional collaboration and alignment, especially early on in the early stage of AI development. The last is the HAX Playbook. So this mitigates all the potential AI system errors, especially when it comes to natural language processing. So coming back to the guidelines, the just the first component of the toolkit, we see that there are about 18 guidelines here, and it's so nicely arranged. The different colors of the card here refer to the rough categories that the guidelines have been grouped into. And the way the grouping works is really based on the user's experiences that they are most relevant. So, for example, there are four groupings here. It depends on when the user is actually interacting with the AI system, either initially during an interaction or during the interaction when it gets something wrong, or even after that and over time. So the first two cards that you see there, the blue cards, those are the design guidelines for setting expectations at the beginning. So what the system can do and how well it can do it. The next section of cards, the red cards, especially the third and the fourth, it asks us to take into consideration what the user's immediate context is, like what the user's location is, task is, attention is. Number five and six, those cards ask us to consider the social norms and context. Then you go into the yellow cards, the first three, seven, eight, and nine. So after the interaction, especially if something goes wrong, these guidelines prescribe what to do when the AI system really gets it wrong. And trust me, it's just a matter of time. Sometimes, most of the times, it will get it wrong at one point or another. We just need to be prepared for it. Number 10 and 11, these are guidelines that advise what to do when the system is uncertain about a particular path. Number 12, 13, and 14, which is the on the green set of guidelines now. So these are about how the system should behave over time. They advise us to remember and learn from user behaviors. Will probably not make disruptive changes even as the system adapts to a particular user. So that's a very high level at what we're going to look at, and we'll deep dive into each of this as well. But just to give you a history of where this is coming from, who developed this, how was this developed, and is this credible enough, and should we be actually talking about this again? So, Microsoft reviewed over 20 years of literature about human AI interaction. In addition to industry white papers, blogs, they extracted over 150 recommendations at the first level. Then they consolidated that into about 20. They tested them by um, uh, using them in a heuristic evaluation of about 13 AI products. Then they refined the guidelines. They tested the refined guidelines with about 49 UX practitioners, with about 20 popular AI products. And then based on that, they revised the guidelines again to improve clarity. So the revised guidelines were then reviewed by about 11 UX experts. So there's a lot of work that has gone into the creation of these guidelines that we're going to talk about at this point in time. And as we mentioned, there was a special mention to the paper as well that was generated. This paper is out there if you'd like to read and learn more about it. So this kind of adds to the evidence of the guidelines quality and the credibility. But there's, I did want to add a couple of things as well. These guidelines are not probably to be taken as sort of a checklist. So if you need additional guidelines for any specific scenario, um, you are most welcome to add that based on your specific use case. So you're using them the right way if you consider them during the development. Now, aren't these guidelines important for all systems, even non AI systems? Definitely. Each guideline is specific to, or but particularly important also to AI systems because most require really new solutions in the face of AI. So, again, these are these are applicable across most common AI based products. So with that, we will dive right into the first section, and we'll talk about how we can use some of these or put these into action. So when you start interacting with an AI product, you want to set the right expectations. That's probably in the order of operations the first thing that you would be interested in. Now, here's a very common example of what you would found. Studies find that even though we're very comfortable with search engines, have been around for a long time. There are a lot of people who really don't understand how much content is actually available on the web, which means it's actually indexed by the search engines. In another way, people think that everything, meaning all the knowledge in the world, is available on the web. It's a lot, but probably not everything. So most also don't understand how search engines work or what the quality of the return results will be, right? So 33% of people use the term magic. Like, you can relate that to the way AI is being used right now. So you may be thinking it's just search and it's not really high stakes scenario. Some If some people overestimate its capabilities, it's not a big deal. Well, it really depends on who and what you're using it for. I mean, if your medical practitioner, if your doctor uses it for consumer search engines instead of PubMed, you might be a little worried there, right? So people have an unrealistic or mismanaged expectations of even search engines. Um, so what do we do about this? Uh, Documentation often isn't the best idea. It isn't the best choice. So there are so many common patterns in which you can convey what a system is supposed to be doing. So this comes in the initial realm where we have to really manage and set expectations with the users. We have to show them examples, to introduce new features only at appropriate times and memorable times. We provide people with some control of the system's accuracy or behavior, which can give them a sense of what the system can do. There are so many ways in which we can, as the first guideline says, make clear what the system can do. And secondly, make clear how well the system can do what it can do. So, one of the guiding principles here is to ensure a very transparent user experience, transparent and friendly and continuously improving AI experience, which begs us to ask ourselves, might we how might we improve the onboarding documentation? How might we improve the contextual help? How might we improve other feedback mechanisms? So, initially itself, if we can take care of a lot of that, it will set us on the right path to success. The next set, after we have our initial guidelines, we have to take into account how a user will interact with the AI live. So during interaction, what are those things that we need to sort of account for and ensure that the users are supported about? So that's the red category. It is during interaction. This is all about context. Context is very important for AI because AI systems make inferences about people and their needs, and those needs really depend on the user's environment, their current tasks, their attention, the larger social and cultural context in which they are operating. Here, let me give you an example. So, if the context is not clear or it's not aware, that can lead to concerns. For example, consider your assistant giving you notifications to tell you, remember to call your mom. Now, imagine that same kind of notification comes up when it is not respecting the context in which you're operating. So, imagine that an assistant could proactively send you reminders when they are due, but not considering your immediate surroundings. So, it's important to think carefully about when and where people will likely be interacting with them. So, if your users are likely to be attending to critical tasks when using the system, like driving, untimely reminders can actually be dangerous for them. So, understand that you can actually infer critical context and time services, or show contextually relevant information as well. But you can't do this in UI alone. So it really takes a lot of effort to actually build that. In particular, imagine you could ask your virtual assistant, like what is the fastest way home. And Microsoft themselves, in their research, they say, well, we tested it in our studies until something really opened our eyes, in that most people do not recognize for a potential for biases in this type of application, except for one person, because fast can really mean different for different people, right? So the product assumes that the average walking speed for everyone is the same. Now, so context really matters in that aspect. So, coming back to our design guidelines, during interaction, we have how might we ensure that time services are based on context to show contextually relevant information, you match relevant social norms, mitigate social biases, to ensure that the communication is very clear and it's fair for the experience. All right, moving us along, and I'll look at all the questions and the comments as soon as I wind this up here shortly. So, the third category here is all about what do you do when AI is inevitably wrong? So it's important to include mechanisms to reduce the cost of those errors to users when this happens. This category is really about traditional AI model errors, but it can be applicable to any sort of AI as well. For example, there are so many common kinds of errors that can happen, but the first two guidelines are really about false positives and false negative errors, which means, for example, consider a scenario where an email client that can flag things as important or unimportant. So what would be a false positive or a false negative? Which one do you think is going to be more costly if it fails to mark something as important, or if it fails to mark something as unimportant? So in this case, to mitigate these errors, you really want to provide the ability for people to move emails from one to the other, or mark or dismiss the items from either bucket, right? So that really will help reduce the cost of those errors. Even if the AI system misses to mark something as important or unimportant, or makes a mistake there, if the experience provides the users the control to correct that error, to override that, and for themselves to mark or unmark or to move it across the folders, the cost of that error is much less. So those are ways in which we can kind of handle that category. So the rest of the guidelines in this category, that at the very least, it's good practice to provide access to an explanation where appropriate, so people can sort of understand why their ais, are behaving the way they are behaving, so which will hopefully help people use them more effectively in the future. And explanations can be short, I mean, not long documentation, which people will ultimately not read. So here's when AI will inevitably get it wrong, ensure that you still have those efficient and transparent AI interactions with people, and think about questions that we should ask up front to understand, how might we do this, and what do we do when AI will go wrong. Planning for when AI will go wrong is probably a very wise idea. Um, so with that, we have the last set there. Over time, it kind of remembers a lot of recent interactions and things. So, but one thing we should bear in mind, even after a user has completed their interaction or their experience with AI and they move on, things change over time. So if you look at these within the context of social media, right? So social networks, they automatically filter or promote content on your feed for you to look at. Now, how many of us have had an experience where you've looked at something, probably liked something on your feed, and then you're bombarded with more of that something? You make the mistake of looking at an inspirational post, And then all of a sudden, your feed is full of inspirational posts, and you can't figure out how to make it stop. Sorry, or why it happened, or if it's just a failed redirect. So, in the case of inspirational posts, I'll say the system learned from user behavior. It updated and adapted, probably not right. Um, Probably did not encourage granular feedback, as the user could like or dislike or hide each individual post. It did not convey the consequences of the user's action. The user did not know, liking a particular inspirational post is going to result in a flood of inspirational posts. So these and other guidelines in this category are all about how to ensure AI that change over time, but also in a way that preserves the user experience, just even when AI is not looking at it. So here's the full list of the green guidelines, and that brings us back to what are the guidelines that we take care of when this is over time. We remember the recent interactions, we learn from user behavior, but we update and adapt cautiously. We encourage granular feedback. We convey the consequences of users' actions clearly to them. We provide them global controls that keeps them in charge. We notify users about the changes we've made. So there's still a lot more that we can do to put the user in charge or in control of the destiny. So that was a whole look at all the design guidelines, and there's just so much more that you can look at if you think about the other components in the toolkit. You can now go explore the design library in terms of real world examples for each of this. You can use the Excel workbook to bring these ideas into life and how you can make that relevant for your specific product. Collaborate cross functionally with your teams and work that through your product. One thing I would want to add is that irrespective of where you are in your journey with your AI product, these guidelines are applicable. It could be for a net new product, it could be for a product that's already out there in production, and you want to take a look at that. So there's a lot of good feedback from people who've used the workbook, and they've on how to use it as well. So this is what we are talking about. It could be a net new greenfield project, or it could also be a product that is already out there and user facing as well. But the most encouraged thing with this is how to use the workbook, how to use the guidelines, and to not do this solo. It takes a village to raise a child, so involve your team and the other perspectives to engage holistically around these guidelines and build a product that is truly impactful to your users. So, this is an example of the workbook where you would actually bring the guidelines together and you would work on this together with your team and you can throw it all together. So, that's how you bring it full circle. You probably don't have the time to look through the entire workbook per se today, but I we'll probably come back in another session to show you how to do that. With that, a couple of resources I did want to leave you with. If you're interested in learning more about these interaction guidelines, a lot of it from Microsoft research team and their resources. But with that, I will take a pause to take any questions, feedback, comments thus far.
Great session. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's quite a bit of information there. So I don't see any questions, but yeah. So I guess one question I'll ask is when you're looking at new product, and you kind of talked about the greenfield projects, right? I guess this is really becoming, how should I put it, prevalent to security. So, like how we think about security from the get go, I guess AI is also becoming where people are thinking about AI from the get go and how that's going to be incorporated to whatever product or uh, they're making.
Yes. So just like we talk about cloud, or we talk about databases, or we talk about security, these are some major pillars with regards to engineering and design of products that have existed before even AI or Gen AI even came into being. So, with the entrance of AI or Gen AI, now security teams are rethinking about or what additionally do I need to take care of in these products. And the existing risks or attack vectors still remain the same. There are still a lot that continue to be applicable and relevant in this area. But it is way more than just using new security tools and checking for more vulnerabilities and things. Because with AI, the most interesting thing about security, or as I call the biggest attack surface for AI or AI systems, is trust.
Hmm.
Humans tend to give AI probably far more agency than it deserves or it's even asked for. It produces, let's take generative AI for example, it produces highly plausible and confident responses, and it may not know the second thing about what it's talking about. But we tend to trust it way more. And that's when design guidelines and principles are, I think, crucial to that experiment. Because if you think about some really good products out there, like I'd say Copilot from Microsoft, there's always at the end of every response, that AI response that it produces, at the bottom right corner, there is AI responses can be inaccurate. Please check with listen. So that is a conscious friction that is introduced in the flow. And we might think, hey, you could actually hide that behind a privacy policy, but no, that's how you are being responsible and ensuring and informing your users that consider this as a first draft, not as an excuse to not use human judgment. So, trust continues to be a huge attack vector, which is why we need guidelines from this, like this, to think about it, as you said, from the get go itself. Because the biggest risk with all of this is reputational risk. Any organization, any enterprise, any individual, anyone who's using AI generate, that reputational risk is real, and it's beyond firewalls and securing your code. You have to now think about securing consequences and securing the outcomes of what is going to come out of this if you fail their trust.
Yeah, and which is huge, right? Like coming back from that, that's going to be the biggest challenge, the PR nightmare, the trust
Yeah.
from the customers. Yeah, I can see that. And I guess everybody also tries to mimic the same AI. So I guess I've seen videos where people are trying to mimic a video and it looks so real. And I guess that's going to be the challenge. How do you validate or verify if that is the real video or if it's coming from the actual source or somebody is kind of making it up and kind of giving that, right? So
Yes,
I think,
yes, a lot of deep fakes, a lot of stories we read, unfortunately, of personal and others is where people are tricked. Again, they let their trust go in these systems when they see those kinds of images or outcomes that are produced by this kind of technology. It's getting very difficult for us to judge ourselves, but as conscious practitioners who want to develop trustworthy systems, there are guidelines from people who've actually been there, done that, who shifted. This is how you'd probably want to build of your own, and we don't have to figure it out by ourselves.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And I don't see any questions, but uh, With that being said, I think we're gonna wrap it up. And but yeah, thank you so much for again coming on the show. It was really good. And this is actually is something that is up and coming. And what I realize is it's not a typical technology, right? Like it's more of a operational, it's more of a guide. So people have to go through and they have to think it through. It's not individual where you're not, it's not technology where you would deploy something or, um, so I think the biggest challenge for me is wrapping my head around. I'm like, how's that going to come all together? And then, as you said, this is a teamwork. So talking to different stakeholders, I guess, and I
Yeah,
can see like the lawyers getting involved and the legal counsel and whatnot. So this is really getting more deeper than we think it is going to get deep.
absolutely. That's why one of my favorite phrases is always to say, "It takes a village to raise a child." You do not want to do it alone. You can take all the help, and if you look at the stories of some really successful AI assistants out there, and if you look at the breakup of their team, they've had mental health practitioners, they've had philosophers, they've had English literature people. I mean, we're talking not engineers and data scientists. Like they know who should sit on that team if this assistant stands any chance of saying or holding a really good conversation with this diverse a population. Right. So absolutely, I think it's a huge opportunity for us. This was I'd say rather challenging for me as well. This is one of the rarest of presentations where I've not done a demo and I have only talking and slide and deck to do. But I always come back to thinking we always focus on how to build the next best thing. And we don't need more inspiration on that. We need more to talk about how to build it right. We need to take two steps back to go three steps forward and fast and furious with this. We need to now just relax and maybe slow down a little, if I may, because the technology is already going fast. We don't want to go faster than that. Maybe just slow down as humans for a minute and just talk about how we're going to build this right, because it's very very critical for us, for our families, for our communities, for people who are going to inevitably, right, use a technology as powerful as this. I mean, I people wouldn't even know that they're using AI these days. AI is like, where not in your phones, in your, I say AI is in my refrigerator for all I care. So it is such an all pervasive and a very important technology for us that we actually sit down and talk about it. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for having me, Abdul.
Yeah, always a pleasure. And then you get more than welcome to come anytime you want. But with that being said, it's a wrap. So thanks everybody for joining, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thanks everybody.
Thank
Bye bye
you.
now.
Bye.